thank you all for joining us today. I know cargo theft has unfortunately been an issue that a number of you have experienced. If you were at the ReMA governance meetings, we outlined what we're doing on the policy front, but also what we're hearing from you all in terms of how you've been impacted. And it's an issue that has become one of ReMA's top priorities because we have heard from so many small and medium-sized business owners that these thefts are causing you to lose 20 to 30% of your overall revenue. So it's risking your ability to invest. It's potentially risking your workers, and it's harming the overall supply chain for our manufacturing sector and diverting really strong tax revenue into illicit markets. So I'm thankful that y'all are here today. I just want to set the stage really quickly before we go into a setting the stage presentation. I think sometimes at ReMA, we've seen a hesitancy for members to reveal that they've been a victim of theft. I think a number of folks that we have spoken to have been angry, understandably so, but they're also feeling vulnerable and sometimes embarrassed for being a victim of theft. You shouldn't be. I know I'm telling you shouldn't be, but that's something that folks will have to internalize. I think the only people that should be embarrassed in this scenario are the thieves that think it's okay to steal from all of you. So with that out of the way, how many folks in this room, by a quick show of hands, have experienced cargo theft in some degree? Okay. So that shows you how much this is impacting the industry overall. And I'm sure if you polled broader ReMA membership, you'd have around 60 to 70% of those hands raised. So you're not alone. I'm glad you're here today as we navigate the trends occurring in cargo theft and opportunities and ways to mitigate it moving forward. And with that, I want to hand things over to Gary to do a quick run through of what we are seeing overall before we launch into a question, a moderated discussion between our two speakers up here today, with the caveat that there are mics in the audience. If you have a question, please walk up to one, raise your hand, or ReMA staff will go ahead and get you connected. Justin is nicely showing you where the mics are. All right, floor is yours.
Thank you guys so much for taking the time. I know I was told there's a cornhole tournament going on right now, so appreciate you guys sacrificing that to be here. Before I started working at CargoNet, I worked 24 years with the Kentucky State Police. The last 14, I did nothing but auto and cargo theft. The last 10 was mostly just cargo theft. So I left there in 2024, came to CargoNet, and we are a analytical database that we house all supply chain fraud and theft. So some of you may have heard of us, some not, but the stats you're going to hear that I'm going to share and some of the trends are stuff that we see every day. We work with we have over 10,000 registered law enforcement officers from across the United States and Canada that, if you were to have a theft and you needed to reach out to somebody in California, Toronto, Miami, we help make those connections. So we're highly invested in what's going on with you, also what's going on with the criminal side, in the hopes that we get some prosecutions and put some people in jail for this. I've long said the greatest prevention is detention, but that's coming from a cop background. Cargo theft, as you will hear, and Scott can attest to this, was a pretty niche thing pre-COVID, and I'll show you some numbers here. Maybe. Well, I'll start with last year's numbers. You'll hear things in the media if you're on LinkedIn, or you see things that cargo theft's a $30 billion a year problem, and that very well could be the case. That's open for discussion. But what I'm showing you here is the actual numbers that we took in from CargoNet, right at $725 million. You see the top 3 states. It's no secret. If you're in the supply chain, California is the biggest threat, has been. Scott, would you agree it always will be?
Always has. So 33 years I've been doing cargo theft investigations and supply chain security. California's always been number one. One of the things I would point out about the numbers that Gary's showing you is that, and this may come as a surprise, but the federal government does not track cargo theft in the United States. So when you look at the CargoNet numbers, and I'm a big proponent of CargoNet, I don't work there, but I use their numbers and their data all the time. When you look at that number, understand that it's a sample size. CargoNet gets its data from their member companies, from law enforcement agencies that volunteer to report their numbers to them, anybody in the industry who reports their numbers to them, and open source data. So it's a sample size. My experience, again, doing it for 33 years, I have always said, and CargoNet has never disagreed with me in public, that I think that they get 1/10 of all full truckload thefts and 1/15 if you include pilferage. So when you look at these numbers, don't go, well, 3,500 thefts, that's really not that much. Multiply that by 15. I think you're in the neighborhood. And when Gary talks about the $30 billion number, there's absolutely no science behind that. It's a made up number. And it drives several of us that are experts in this field crazy. But again, if you take that 724 million number and you multiply that by 15, you have a significant number. So
Just the goal is not to make you guys cargo theft experts before you leave. Just give you a basic knowledge of what the landscape is right now. And when you leave, you'll have a couple guys that you can call legitimately any time of the day or night that will help you out. We put it into two different pockets. Straight theft is the what you would think of traditional physical theft. A truck driver goes to a truck stop, goes in to take a shower, get something to eat, and the bad guys come in and steal the shipment. That still is a majority of what we see, but it's getting closer. Burglary and theft. Scott mentioned pilferage. That's when they'll pop open the back of the trailer, steal half a load, couple cases, whatever. We see armed robbery on this list. Normally, I would tell you that there's not a lot of violence in cargo theft, and there's not. Recently, we've had a case where two cases actually, in Illinois, multiple armed suspects came to the truck driver, said, open up the trailer. They took out everything. It's high-end electronics, highly targeted. Then you're going to hear a lot of talk about strategic theft. And when we break down strategic theft, that's theft by deception. And you can see there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but in essence, they are using some type of deception, whether it be identity theft, business email compromise. We talk about internationalized domain names, very sophisticated ways to interrupt the supply chain, pretend to be somewhere they're not, misdirect the shipments, or just steal them outright. Some of the things we deal with, technology, of course, when you're conferences like this or in the trades that we're in, technology is key. You want to stay on top of the emerging technology. Oftentimes it is something that the bad guys are already on top of. So we see like tracking spoofs. I don't know if you guys monitor your supply chain. A lot of things are used like third-party apps to track drivers. Those are being spoofed. We see phishing. How many of your companies do phishing tests on your email? That's a big thing. Social engineering. We see like the sneak peeks with the broken seals. There's a lot of different ways that they're attacking this, and there's no signs that it's slowing down right now.
And then what I would add to that about the methods is they pressure test all these methods, right? So they kind of always tell us what they're about to do. So if we use the email phishing and the social engineering as an example, 2 years ago, I was speaking at a conference and I was asked, how often are you seeing email phishing and social engineering used? And my answer at that time was maybe once a month. As we sit here today, it's every day, all day, nonstop. So they pressure test the methods. They figure out which way, which little tweaks they have to make to make it work the best. And then it's just an all out assault. And it doesn't matter what the method is. That's the way they do it with all their methods.
I told you this is the new normal. This is just some historical data going back to 2010, tracking about 1,000 cargo thefts a year. You see in 3 years later, it's up slightly, 5%. 2017, up a little bit more. But as we came out of COVID, and in the last, 4 to 5 years, from 2017 to 2025, we're 150% increase. When it comes to the strategic side of things, the theft by deception, we're looking at about a 1,500% increase in thefts using that MO. So that's the number doesn't even sound real to me.
That went from roughly 3% of all cargo theft. So strategic theft wasn't even on most people's map. 3% of all cargo theft to 33 or 34% of all cargo theft in 2 years, just like that.
And that's what's getting the most attention. You know, that's where there's a lot of fear there, and rightfully so. You know, Scott's been instrumental in developing some legislation through the Corker bill. I know that's been talked about today. My boss, Keith Lewis, was on 60 Minutes, which I didn't know it was still a show, but, he was there.
He's in his 60s. And so 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so there's the strategic theft method to steal some of Guy Fieri and Sammy Hagar's tequila. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. A guy I work with who's quite a bit younger didn't know who Sammy Hagar was. It kind of broke my heart.
He can't drive 55.
No. Theft by commodity types. You see going into last year, food and beverage is high. And we talked about food and beverage. It's an all-encompassing, you know, what we're seeing over the last 18 months is a high concentration of frozen food, meat theft, seafood out of the northeast part of the country. Of course, you have alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages. So you've got beer and liquor and energy drinks kind of dominate that. Household goods, you see it's kind of hanging in there. Talking about appliances, you know, things of that nature. Electronics went down a little bit. They're a little bit easier to track. You have serial numbers. You have online activations now. But I think what you guys are interested in is the metals. And you can see in 2023, and this is, you know, as Scott said, a sample size. We had 69 cargo thefts involving metals. Last year we had 236. So that in itself is alarming.
And I'm a firm believer that the metal loads are way underreported.
Yeah.
I think theft of loads of metal is just way underreported in general.
Can I interrupt this for a second?
Absolutely.
So do you think they're underreported? Why is that reason?
I think that a lot of people that haul and move metal don't necessarily have it insured, right? There's a lot of insurance that doesn't cover metal loads, right? So if you don't have it insured and you don't need a theft report, do you always have to report it, right? A lot of times in general, cargo theft in general is difficult to report to law enforcement, right? So a lot of times when Gary's helping somebody report one, you know, Gary and I are working a case right now in Louisiana where there's 13 thefts from the same address. It took us 5 days to get a police officer to write a report, right? Not because the guy wasn't willing, but because his local DA kept telling him it's not their jurisdiction. We can't take this. He wanted to write the report, so it's not on the law enforcement, right? So I think sometimes people think it's too difficult. They don't want to go through the process of it. They can't get a report. You name it. There's a whole bunch of it, right? Like I know of loads. I'm in Arizona. We're a heavy metal state, right? A lot of metal moving out of Arizona and into Arizona. And I know of several thefts over the last couple of years in Arizona that did not get reported. I got phone calls on them, but nobody reported them.
So on the insurance side, and we heard this in the transportation and logistics session just before this one, where you nailed it. Most of these loads, especially if they're metal loads, haven't historically had to have cargo insurance tied to them. Are you seeing an increase in those businesses purchasing cargo insurance?
Yeah, well, we get asked the question more often now. Are we covered for metal? Right? Especially for flatbed carriers, we get that question a lot. Are we covered for metal?
Yeah.
Now to us, it's not for my company. I can only speak for my company. For my company and my past company that I recently left, it's a covered commodity. It's not a normally excluded commodity. So for us, it's an easy answer, but there are a lot of policies out there that will exclude commonly cell phones, high-end electronics, metals, pharmaceuticals, specific things like that in their policy. You know, and that is really people's goal is to get cheaper insurance, but they sometimes don't understand what they're giving up, right? So
check your insurance policies. Make sure you're covered.
yeah.
I put this in here just so you can see the heat map. Obviously, Southern California has burned a hole through the paper, and you can see up around Chicago. But what sticks out to people who've been in this business, like Scott and I, those are much more concentrated numbers, areas 10 years ago. We're starting to see it spread like a virus. And we're getting calls from places that historically have never had cargo theft, or at least never reported cargo theft before. You see for the strategic theft, Indiana has jumped up to be a leader. Arizona's in that list. So it's a very widespread, and that goes to the trouble in reporting as well. When we look at when we break the commodities down by subtype, vehicle accessories, that's tires. That's our fancy way of saying tires. It's been number one the last 2 years. But if you look at where copper was in 2024 to where it's at now, it's number two. And I can tell you, just at CargoNet, my job is to triage cargo theft every day. So I get the reports from our customers every day, and there's hardly a day that goes by that we're not mentioning metals, whether it be copper or aluminum or tin or something that's been stolen. These fluctuate a lot, but we obviously, as the market for metals increases and the prices go up, that it's a targeted commodity.
Metal in particular is very trendy in cargo theft, right? It'll trend up, it'll sit with us for a year or two, and then it will literally fall off the map. It'll disappear. And then it will come back and it'll hang out for a year or two. I read a report a long time ago. You can Google it. I don't remember who wrote the report, but it said that a lot of theft around metal coincides with big coming events like World Cup, Olympics, stadium builds, all those types of things, right? When people are building infrastructure. And when you read that report, if you Google it and you find out, it matches up pretty well. It's pretty spooky. Whether it's credible or not, I don't know. I'm not an expert on that kind of a report, but it's pretty eye-opening.
And I think the World Cup is coming.
That's correct.
So, this is just for copper. Copper is the number one metal commodity that we deal with, that we're familiar with. Obviously, Los Angeles is number one, but does it surprise anybody that Wilcox County, Alabama is number two? So much so, I know the name, the address, the owner, everything of the yard there in Pine Hill, Alabama. You see it enough and you get to deal with them enough. And one of the problems there is they have a 2-person police department trying to take these reports. So highly targeted. A lot of stuff comes out of there. And again, look at the map there. It's, if you zoomed in, you probably know some of these. They might be you. Some of these spots here on the map.
But look at so if you kind of think back to the heat map that Gary showed earlier, where he talked about it spreading into what we call non-traditional areas, that came along with the big jump in strategic theft, because they don't physically have to be there anymore. They're going to send somebody to go get it, or they're going to trick somebody into delivering it for them. So they can target the commodities they want wherever they are. They can be in, you name the country, and target the freight in whatever state they want. And you see here the split on the pie. 52% of the metal thefts are by deception, which would be strategic theft. And then you look at that map, it compares very well to the strategic theft map earlier. So again, they're tricking people into picking up these loads or delivering these loads for them. They're not physically going out and taking them at least half the time.
Well, I'm surprised too by the theft by location type, with airport, port, and rail yard being at just over 3%. Why is that? I would think that those would be major hubs for the theft to be occurring.
It's going to be more rail yard than it is airport.
Yeah.
Airports are more secure than the rail yards.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I will say is we typically, the rail does not report their theft. They were forced to make a statement last year, and I think the number was 65,000 thefts on the railroad just through BNSF Railway.
No, it was for the top 3 rail.
For the top 3?
Top 3 rail reported 65,000 thefts, and they openly said, so I testified next to them at a Senate committee hearing, and they said they thought that was underreported.
Yeah. So we don't capture a lot of the rail theft. So, again, Scott talks about extrapolating the data. It's a problem. We look at aluminum, which is our number 2 metal. Look at Riverside, California, and then New Haven, Connecticut. And then, granted, there's just a couple of samples here, but one thing I'll note as you were looking at the theft by location type, warehouse and distribution center doesn't that we classify where it was taken from. So if it's a strategic theft, they pick it up there, it's supposed to deliver elsewhere, it gets redirected. We use that as the basis of where the theft happened at.
So not to be mistaken with, they're not breaking into the warehouse to take it. That's just where they're picking it up.
Other metals, Los Angeles County, still number 1. I don't know that I can change that. I've been working a lot with Baltimore County Police Department and the FBI in Baltimore. They've seen an uptick in cargo theft there. But again, it's getting buy-in from you guys as an industry. If you happen to be a victim, law enforcement being knowledgeable, and then just the industry kind of rallying and supporting when these things happen. Real quick, going through one of the main schemes with a double brokering scheme. This is when somebody assumes the identity of a motor carrier. So you've hired a broker to manage your transportation. They go and they get a carrier from their pool. Well, you have the bad actor who impersonates that carrier. So they get the information on the pickup. They immediately become the freight broker. They take that information. The majority of the time they will tender that to a legitimate carrier. And then so if it was coming from Las Vegas to Ontario, California, we're going to take it from Las Vegas to Buckeye, Arizona now. And nobody's any the wiser. They do this these shipments are publicly available if you're in the trucking business on public load boards. So you have like DAT, Truck Stop, all reputable places. DAT's one of the oldest. DAT stands for Dial a Trucker. So I don't know if you know this, back in the day before cell phones and internet, they would go to the truck stop and call into the load board and say, hey, do you have anything near Las Vegas? And they would hook them up. So we see them being impersonated. We see a lot of the fraud take place, not because of the load boards, but just because of that infrastructure that they can post the loads, redo that.
And when they call that legitimate trucking company and they book them on there, that legitimate trucking company has no idea that they're being involved, and they're just going where they're told to go with it, right? And Gary mentioned Buckeye, Arizona, but Arizona seems to have become the hub. I'm from Arizona. That's where I'm located, and Arizona seems to have become the hub for a really high percentage of these metal loads. No matter where in the country they come from, they bring them to Arizona. And I think I've had a theory for a while that I think is a solid theory, that they're doing one of two things. They are temporarily staging them in Arizona to put them in an ocean container so they can take them immediately to the port, and they don't have to sit in California because they're worried about the task forces in Arizona catching it or finding it while it's staged in California. So they stage it temporarily in California, they get it on intermodal, and they take it right to the port, and off it goes to usually the APAC region, right? Or some of the loads are staged in Arizona and then turn south to Mexico. So I think you got probably about a 60-30, 80-20 split on that, 80% going out to California, overseas, and then 20 to 30% going south down to Mexico.
We've seen the rise in voice over IP phones, easily disposable. You get a text now, your Google numbers. You can be anywhere. Make them say you're from anywhere. We've discovered there are phone brokers. So if do you need 30 new phone numbers? Well, we can get you 30 new phone numbers. So we see that a lot. We see disposable email addresses.
Use AI to put an accent on them when they talk.
Yeah.
They sound like they're from your part of the country.
We could all create an email address now in about 2 minutes. So that's, the way that freight moves and the systems that have been in place for so long have really turned against them when it comes to fraud and theft. What we've seen a lot lately is purchase MCs. And so if you don't know what that is, you have, like, coming into COVID, trucking was hot, paid a lot of money. A lot of people started trucking companies. They made a lot of money, in that couple year span. The trucking side of things taking a downturn. Really, the only thing valuable that they have right now is their MC and DOT numbers with the emails and phones associated with. Why that's valuable to the bad guys is, as these legitimate carriers have been hauling freight for the last 3 or 4 years, they have been vetted and known to be good carriers, for freight brokers and in vetting platforms and everything. So now the bad guys buy it. I've seen as high as $50,000 for the numbers and access to their email and phone number. So you give all that up
And logins.
and their logins, to the load boards, to the freight brokers. The most I've seen in a week perpetrated, one MC that had been sold was 15 thefts in a week. So they start stealing on Tuesday. By Friday, the industry kind of knows it's happened, but now they're ghosts. I'm sure you guys have seen trucks that have just, the mailbox lettering on the side, just Scott Cornell Trucking today. Tomorrow it'll say Gary's Trucking, whatever. And these are just like, if you have social media, just search it. I have a 4-year-old MC and DOT authority based in Ohio, clean, Amazon included. That means they're already vetted in Amazon. They're in their relay system. They're hauling for them, $25K. And Scott will tell you this, if cargo thefts are anything, they are tremendous on return on investment. So if they spend $25,000 and they steal $2 million worth of stuff in a week, pretty good return. Same thing, selling MCs. They are a green light and highway in my case, and these are vetting programs that the freight brokers use. And then sometimes they're just full ads. Start your own trucking company. We'll get you an MC, a DOT number, go from there. So it's really a scary landscape right now because technology has pushed this to where, 15 years ago, you had to own a truck and a trailer, or at least have a CDL to go to the truck stop and steal it. You had to have your own assets. Now the bad guys have everybody's assets, all behind a computer in whatever location that has Wi-Fi in whatever country they want to be in. And all of it's for the taking out there. So hopefully that sets the stage, or if anybody wants to leave, or let me know.
Oh, you're all required to stay in this room. All right. So I think that was a fantastic overview, and we'll keep the clicker up. And if we can keep the slides running, just in case anyone wants to go back to anything as we go through the presentation or go through these questions. What makes cargo theft today so different than what we saw 10 or even 15 years ago? Is that simply due to the increase in technology and what's available? Why is this becoming such a large issue now? Were we just not hearing about it?
No, it's the players, right? So, again, having done this for 3 decades, the players that we have committing cargo theft now are completely different than they have been in the past. So prior to 2020, most cargo theft was conducted by these very small regional crews. They were small blocks of usually family based, right? Brothers, cousins, uncles, fathers, sons. It was, sort of a family business. There was maybe 10 of them, give or take. And they primarily did straight theft. That's why I said, strategic theft at that time was 2 or 3%. There was a couple of crews in Florida that were doing identity theft and fictitious pickups, a couple of crews in California that were doing fictitious pickups, and that was it. And so most cargo theft was very regionalized. Again, if you go back to that heat map, the whole center of the country was just blank. There was nothing in there. It was, Ohio, Florida, or Chicago, Florida, Memphis, Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, California. And that was it, right? And we knew him. We'd pull video from a truck stop investigating a theft, and I'd say, oh, that's Gary. I know Gary. I know his crew. I know where he sells the stuff. I know what he steals.
Now, thank you.
What's that?
I'm reformed now, thank you.
You are, yeah. Well, they say the best cops, But anyway, in 2020, we started to see the involvement, maybe late 2019, early 2020, we started to see the involvement of international crime rings. And they realized quickly during COVID how easy the transportation industry was willing to work over the phone, via email. No face-to-face, very anonymous way to do business. And they realized, hey, this is easy. We can we can do business with people over the phone, over email, using VoIP phones, using false emails, all these different things, and just tricking people. And they were a little clunky in the beginning. You had to learn the language. They had to learn how to talk to the drivers. They had to learn to talk to the freight brokers and all that. And then they just got really good at it, and now they have call centers, it's over two dozen different countries that we see it coming from, right? And they have call centers that are like our call centers. I mean, they have people that come in every day with a backpack and a coffee and sit down in front of 3 computer monitors, and their job all day is to book stolen freight. So it's a night and day landscape on who's doing it now.
Okay, so for those in this room, I came to ReMA around 2.5 years ago. So when I first heard of cargo theft, when Todd and I were talking about, Todd's our Senior Director of Law Enforcement Outreach, who runs our Scrap Theft Alert program, is heavily interconnected with cargo theft, works with law enforcement and the FBI to identify these thefts, help you all find lost loads. But when Todd was telling me about cargo theft, the picture I had in my brain was a pirate, an eye patch, a peg leg, and generally a bad alcohol habit, right? And it seems like most of these thefts aren't happening by entities like those.
I mean, when Gary dresses casually.
Maybe, at least not always, right? So I want to take a step back. You talk about the VoIP phones. All I know in that space is the Google phone, right? Those were big in 2014 to 2018, at least with my generation, not for thefts. But what is the most sophisticated form of cargo theft that you've seen recently?
I think we are seeing a rise in, and I had to educate myself on this, internationalized domain names.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, and I'm by no means an IT expert, but I've dealt with this enough. So you have a company email, Gary@ReMA.com. When you register a domain, you can use internationalized characters. So you can add an accent. This is the true story. The first time I saw it, I didn't know what to call the squiggly line on top of the A. So I Googled squiggly line on top of the A, and I was directed to an international keyboard to see the accents and that. But the supply chain moves as fast as it can. Mm-hmm. It's built for speed, which is built for the bad guys. So when you get an email from somebody that you're doing business with, Gary@ReMA.com, and you've emailed back and forth consistently, are you going to notice the little irregularities in that? Probably not. You're probably not. You're going to see it's for me. And it's got to where they have socially engineered their responses. And so, if I'm the freight broker, I'm Gary@ReMA.com, and I booked this shipment, and I'm talking to this carrier. Now they're Gary@ReMA with the accent, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm at a conference. Call me at this number if anything happens. I'm going to redirect this shipment from here. I'm going to throw a couple extra $100 to you." And they have no idea. The driver has no idea that that's what's happened. And so you're 4 or 5 days after delivery, it doesn't get delivered. They're trying to figure out what happened. You call the driver and they say, "Well, Gary emailed me." And so the first thing you're going to do is come yell at me. And I'm going to say, "I didn't email. I didn't say that." Yeah. You get the chain and you see there's the internationalized domain names. So it's very hard to figure out. We've seen very large freight brokers targeted with this. And like I said, they're socially engineering to say things that make sense. They know that there's a large portion of us that they go out to freight conferences and fraud conferences and things of that nature. We post about it on LinkedIn. We tell everybody where we're at. If you don't think the bad guys aren't there too, maybe you should get rid of your social media, because they are embedded with us. They know exactly what we're doing. Scott tells people all the time, if you have found a new way to fight this, do not post it on social media, because they will see it. So they are using technology to twist and skirt by things that most people would not even think of. Wouldn't think twice to see an email, to notice that in an email.
Here's the thing about that, though, and Gary and I talk about this all the time. I agree with everything Gary just said. I think that's the way that they're manipulating the use of emails and load boards and mirroring and creating email accounts with companies and everything like that is becoming much more sophisticated. And the freight brokers are going crazy because there's at least 24 methods of strategic theft right now. And most freight brokers, when they ask me or they call me, they can't even really figure out how they've been stolen from. I have to ask them 20 questions to get to the bottom of it and figure it out for them. But at least half of the thefts we see are not sophisticated, and they are easily preventable. Mm-hmm. We looked at one today. They assigned a load of tires to a wrecking company. Somebody brokered a load of tires to a wrecking company.
To like a wrecker service that would
like a towing company.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at it and seeing what it was, they saw it had an MC number. They hired them. They don't even have a truck to haul a load of tires. Right? We see it all the time. We lost 6 loads today. Okay, give us the MC number. We look up the MC number. They have 2 power units. How did you assign 6 loads to 2 power units? We see this. This is half of what we see every day still. We could, if the industry would just, as Gary always says, if they would just learn to use Google.
Yeah. Google is your friend.
We would eliminate.
People tell you
Google
what they are. And when people tell you who they are, believe them. If I say I'm Gary's Wrecker Service, it took us 4 seconds to find a picture of their wrecker with the MC and DOT number on it to realize they're not an over the road hauler.
And somebody assigning the freight, Gary said the freight is moving. The transportation industry is trying to move too fast. And I always kind of, go to that Wyatt Earp quote, fast is good, but slow is accurate. Right. And I have clients all the time. They'll go, yeah, Scott, but I'm trying to run a business. I'm trying to move freight. And I, this stuff takes time. And I say, how much time does a theft take? Because when you have a theft, that's all you do for the next 2 weeks. You deal with that theft for the next 2 weeks, and you do with your client complaining, and your insurance payments, and and everything else. So, it's to a point where take 3 extra minutes per load or 2 extra minutes per load. Google a couple of things. Slow down just a little bit, right? And a lot of this stuff could go away quickly.
So what I'm hearing is moving too quickly is one of the mistakes that folks make. And you name another 2 of the most common mistakes that you see victims of cargo theft making. They can easily prevent.
You do one and then I'll do one.
I think, considering the audience here, if you're a shipper, there are a lot of red flags when you have trucks that pull up. We put a lot of emphasis on our freight brokers and our carriers, and a lot of times, a lot of these things could be prevented at the shipper level. When you see, and not everything is bad, but when you see a truck come in with mailbox stickers on the door, when they may not even know. Sometimes it takes just say, hey, where'd you say you were taking this to? And when they tell you that's not where the load's going, you can pretty much shut it down there. But there's just as a shipper, as a freight broker, as whatever, you want to move fast. You want to get them off the dock, get the next truck in there. Let's keep it moving. But sometimes some just due diligence there, a little precautionary, slow down, take in the environment, look at the assets that they brought in. I had a couple thefts of copper that were going to be transnational. They were going to, from coast to coast, and they picked them up in a day cab. So a day cab has no sleeper. There was no place for them to stop. These guys aren't taking the tractor trailer to a hotel, so there was and they just, they had the pickup number. They loaded them and off they went and never to be seen again. So just some due diligence at the shipper, to your guys on the docks, just to, your gut feeling will tell you a lot. And just to see the drivers, see their equipment, and take inventory of, does this pass the smell test?
I think that's a great one. I think that shippers need to cooperate much more with the freight brokers on that handoff part, because as Gary went through the numbers earlier, right, you see the warehouse is the number one place. That means point of pickup is the weakest link in the supply chain. So that has to be a better partnership. I'm going to go a little higher level and say, I'm going to go past the theft and I'm going to say, raise your hand. How many of you in this room, if you got a call right now that you had a theft, and everybody at your company knows exactly what to do because you have a plan and everybody knows what that plan is? Raise your hand.
Bravo.
1. Bravo. Good for you, sir. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see. I have a stack of thefts on my desk right now. People call me. We had a theft. Okay, here's what I need from you. 5 days later, I still need that information. 6 days later, 8 days later, 9 days later, I need that information. I can't help you. I can't help you 9 days later. I don't have the bill of lading. I don't have pictures from the pickup if they exist. You know, I don't have the rate confirmation. I don't have details on the cargo or what it is. You can't react that slowly. You can't hurry up and wait. So I would encourage you all to take as a number one takeaway from here, go back and formulate a plan and then test that plan. Chuck Forsythe is one of the, long timers in cargo theft, just like me. And he teaches his clients to do roundtables all the time. They create a plan. Here's how we'll react if there's a theft. And then he walks in one day and he turns everything upside down and he says, hey, we had a theft. He gives them the scenario. I don't care what you're doing today. This is what we're doing. We're going to see how we respond to this. See if do you know somebody that's going to pick up the phone for you at 12 o'clock at night? Gary and I get phone calls all the time, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. Do you know somebody that's going to pick up the phone for you at 11 or 12 o'clock at night if you have a cargo theft? Because it doesn't happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Right? Do you know somebody who knows the right people that are going to react in law enforcement for you in a cargo theft rather than just call 911? Are you networked? Do you know private investigators that you can hire? Do you know if your insurance company can help you? We have our own cargo theft team for our clients. So our clients call us, we immediately react and we investigate. And I get the calls in the middle of the night. You may be with an insurance company that does that. My old employer does that. Do you know what resources are available to you? Do you know how to connect with the right resources? Do you know about industry organizations like TAPA, the Transported Asset Protection Association, like the Southwest Transportation Security Council, like the Midwest Cargo Security Council? Do you know these organizations? Because those are the ones that they're going to get you in touch with the right people when you have a theft, right? So if you don't have a plan, that's one of the biggest mistakes you can make.
So I want to talk through, in addition to the plan, what does good look like in this space, right? If someone is trying to improve their own security practices or harden their own infrastructure, be it people, be it security, physical security at the yard, be it technology education training or more, what should recyclers in this room have in place today outside of the plan?
I think you can never over document. I've talked to a lot of shippers who are hesitant to take a copy of a driver's license. They are hesitant to take down the information on the truck for privacy reasons. And to that, I would say, it's your stuff. Do what you want. If they give it to you, they've just given you consent. If they don't give it to you, you get to make the decision whether you want those people to haul your goods or not. So when you implement your plan, knowing that I'm going to need, and we're working through this to compile a list from our law enforcement friends, because, you've seen the show The First 48 Hours. Like it's pretty much the same.
It is
in cargo theft. If I can get something in the first 12 hours, there's a good chance I'm going to be able to track it down. So do I have a copy of the bill of lading? Do I have a commercial invoice that has, what the commodity is? And, I see a lot of things of copper that'll say 42,000. Is 42,000 pounds just is that the going size for a truck? Because I see that's almost every bill of lading is 42,000 pounds, and it'll just say metals. Are we dealing with bare bright copper? Do we have, is this scrap copper in? I've seen it in cardboard boxes, or do we have copper wire? So knowing exactly what you have to lose, having that documented, having all your things in order to where you can say you have that person that's available that can say, hey, here's what we have, here's who we have, go do your thing.
That part is extremely important, because in January I worked a case. I had somebody call me Friday night. Hey, Scott, I have a guy who's telling me he's got a mechanical breakdown and he's got a load of metal. And don't ask me the type of metal. I had never heard the name of it before, but it's $450,000 load. Right. And he was smart. He's pretty smart around cargo theft. He's dealt with it before. So the minute he felt like something was wrong, he called me. It's not even a client. He's just a good friend. And I said, okay, where was it picked up? Cleveland. Where's it going? Kingman, Arizona. Okay. Where is he? He's saying he's in Tonopah. Okay. Well, that's a problem, because he's got no business being south of the 40, first of all. Right. And I said, okay, we got to figure out if he still has the freight. Have him send a picture of himself with the load and the truck in Tonopah. So the guy sends a picture of himself standing in front of the load, doing this, right? Thumb up, everything like that. And he sends me the picture, and I said, he's not in Tonopah. And he says, well, how do you know that? And I said, because in the direction he's facing in Tonopah, he'd have mountain ranges behind him in three of the 4 directions that he could be in, and it's all flat. He's not in Tonopah. We were able to get a ping through, I think, highway on his ELD, and it was in Phoenix. So I've trained Phoenix PD on cargo theft in the past. I have good connections there. I reach out. I get a great response. They're all over it. They dispatch somebody from the South Mountain Division. That officer calls me, and the first thing he says to me, how are you going to be able to tell me that this is the metal that your guy owns? That this is his stuff? And I said, well, that's a question he has to answer. And he did. He got the officer everything he needed to identify the metal, and they found the guy offloading the metal near scrap yards down in downtown Phoenix, and they arrested him and they recovered the load. But that was the first question I got from that patrolman who was on his way over to interdict on that.
So it sounds like verification, supply chain visibility, your own chain of custody, records that you keep are really key to help that recovery. And I want to lean into this recovery with a reminder. If you have questions, please raise your hand, come up to the mic. I know that many of you contact us on a routine basis, but you have 2 experts who are dealing with cargo theft every day.
And Todd forwards those to us anyway, most of the time.
Yes, so. And helping y'all recover, which we've actually had some really strong successes with lately. So I want to talk through that. Are there any specific technologies that folks can employ right now to help either prevent or recover theft once they've experienced it? And I know timing is really significant here, but are there any tracking technologies?
There's a million tracking technologies, right? And there's some really good new ones coming out. There's one coming out in the market that I'm currently testing right now that to me is a game changer. If it's legit, it can't be jammed, and it's tiny, and it comes with a 2-year battery. And if it works the way they say it works, it'll be amazing. And it's $20. So, if I date myself, when the first tracker came out, it was $3,000. It was the size of a brick, and it was terrible. They couldn't track for crap, but the technology that's out there is great. Now, here's the thing you got to understand about tracking. It needs to be GPS and cellular, right? So if you lose one signal, you get the other. The second thing is they all look like they work great on the website, right? If you're going to use them with any frequency, they should give you a free tester. Say, hey, send me one. I'll test it. If I like it, I'll buy 20 from you. I'll buy 30 from you. I'll buy whatever. Get a tester, put it in your family vehicle, whatever, put it on a truck that's going in areas where cell service is poor, things like that, see how it responds. I'm a big motorcycle guy, so I throw them in my motorcycle and I ride out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona and I see what my signal looks like. That's how I test them, right? I used to track my kids when they were younger, but they're older now, so they'd figure it out. But test all those things, reach out to experts like myself or Gary or Keith Lewis or Chuck Forsyth. We work with different tracking companies all the time. I'm always happy to give people advice on it. There's some really good ones out there. If you go to any of those organizations, those industry organizations that I talked about, they usually have tracking companies that they deal with and they're associated with. TAPA does, Southwest Transportation Security Council, they do things like that, right? The other thing is there's things out there called data dots. Has anybody heard about data dots? It is, they use them for motorcycle recoveries, but they can work for metal too. You can actually spray it on a metal or a small part of a metal, and it has a microdot. And inside that microdot, it has like 30 characters. Law enforcement has to use a specific tool to read it. But inside there, it can have 30 characters. You can have your name, your address, your phone number, things like that. You can put an order number on it. You can put whatever you want on it, stuff like that. There's technology like that. There's simple things depending on what you're shipping for metal. Douse it in Tide. Take a bottle of Tide, splash it over the metal. When law enforcement is looking at it, you could take a UV light to it and you could say, hey, I doused this in Tide. You take a UV light to it, it's going to glow. There's a bunch of, you can buy markers like that from party stores. You can write your name on some of the metal, right? And it's invisible to the naked eye. You take a UV light, you shine it on there. You got a load number, you have a company name, something like that. Those are some really basic things that cargo thieves tend not to look for, right? The problem is if they're using their truck to pick up the load, you're not going to be able to put tracking on it, right? So your tracking has to be in the pallet or in the metal, or you have to have some way to identify that metal if it's common or scrap or something like that.
A much more lo-fi, reasonable response is, and first of all, kudos to you guys for being here because you're developing your own network,
right?
Whether you're developing a network of like-minded people. I encourage you to do that with your local law enforcement, because when you've implemented a tracking device, you have to call somebody. Many cases, you can Google the local area and you get a police department that may close at 10 o'clock at night, so knowing the right resources to call and having the right people, to dial up in the case of emergency. We're a very small community that does cargo theft. Back when I first started in 2010, we had cargo theft task forces across the country. They have all but disappeared. California is still pretty strong. We see some new ones forming, but California, New Jersey has a couple guys. Our friends in Miami are down to a couple guys. Georgia's is gone.
I just found out yesterday Arizona's creating a cargo theft coalition.
Yeah.
With law enforcement.
So chances are, if you can get a hold of one of us or one of them, they'll know somebody. This is one of those type of things. We don't know a guy, we know a guy that knows a guy. So
I'm going to ask one question, then we'll go out to the audience. I know that law enforcement budgets have been especially constrained over the last several years, and we've sort of seen a reduction in forces. Where does cargo theft rank in terms of priority when you're dealing with person-to-person crimes or crimes that actually impacting people?
It depends on where you are in the country, right? In California, they have four task forces?
Mm-hmm.
They have 4 task forces, and those task forces, it's their number one priority. That's what they do, right? If you go to the New Jersey team, they do cargo theft, auto theft, and contractors' equipment theft. So it's one of 3, right? If you're in Iowa, there's nobody. If you're in Nebraska, there's nobody. If you're in Oklahoma, there's nobody, right? So you have to be able to get law enforcement. Now, at like the TAPA conference, we have, 54 law enforcement officers coming to get educated on cargo theft from across the country. You talk about Buckeye, Arizona. I'll give you an example. I just used my family influence. My brother-in-law is a detective in Buckeye, so I made him come to a cargo theft conference with me. So now when things go to Buckeye, I bug him, right? I mean, you kind of have to create your own network sometimes, but law enforcement gets a bad rap on this. And I'll tell you why, because outside of those task force areas, most police officers that we call have never encountered a cargo theft ever in their career. So you're trying to educate them in 10 minutes over the phone what it is, how they have to react to it, and everything. And they're like on the phone with somebody they don't know who's telling them what to do, right? Now, we're not being bossy with them, but we're just trying to explain to them, this is how it works. This is what's going on. And they've never heard of it. Now, what I find is that when you're able to adequately explain it to them, they're always on board.
Mm-hmm.
They when they realize, hey, this, just like that guy in Phoenix, and when he busted the guy and everything, he called me afterwards. He goes, I'll take as many of these as you have. It's a $450,000 bust for him, right? These guys love this. Peoria PD worked a case with us last year. We told them we thought they had a warehouse operation going on in Peoria. I live in Peoria, Arizona. I go to them. We tell them what's going on. They looked at us like we had three heads. But when we explained it to them, they hit the warehouse with SWAT that night, and they recovered $3.2 million worth of cargo. And they were all on board for it. And now they travel around Arizona with me training Arizona law enforcement on how to do cargo theft. So I think law enforcement gets a bad rap. I think it's mostly because the people calling them are confused. They don't understand how they've been stolen from. They don't understand what's going on. So how can they adequately explain it to law enforcement exactly what happened? Quite often we hear, well, you're in Ohio. You're calling me about a load in Texas. Call your local PD, because the police officer in Texas doesn't really know what he's being told or she's being told, right? So I don't think it's low on the priority list. Obviously, I think crimes against people and violent crimes and things like that are always going to take the priority. But I think 99% of the time, if you can make the police officer understand what is going on, they're on board.
So that's not only work that y'all are all doing, but for everyone in this room, we mentioned it during Capital Conveyors, the importance of building out relationships. Yes. Not just with your policymakers, not just within your community, but with your law enforcement entities. And you just made a great example. Someone in Arizona, if you're getting a call for a theft that occurred in Michigan, might not necessarily be able to assist you because they're just not familiar with it. So that goes out to all of you. Having a conversation with your law enforcement might not directly help you at that point in time, but it could help a neighbor across the country and vice versa. So
and networking amongst yourselves. I mean, you guys have a great organization here. If I'm any of you and I'm not located in Arizona, I'm meeting every member of ReMA that is located in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to get their connections in Arizona and vice versa, right? You guys should be sharing your connections. You should make connections with any law enforcement you have contact with and then share those connections amongst each other, because the thefts move in both directions.
Gary, we've got a question in the audience.
Yes, it's a very simple question. So if I subscribe and using CargoNet, what would be the chances of actually me recovering my load, and what are the, I would say, the ratio of prosecution that you guys have achieved?
So we pride ourselves on the long game. So if you sign up to CargoNet, we're going to input your data. We are going to disseminate that to our law enforcement network. We are generally not the ones that are calling the police. That's something that's on you. Where we shine is when the police call us. And in the last 18 months, there's probably not a week that's not gone by that we've got a call from some police agency that's, hey, I'm in a warehouse, or hey, I'm in a parking lot. I see this transload happening. Can you help me? And that's when, we'd be familiar with your product. We'd say, yep. That came from this place. Let me call them. Hey, is this yours? Yes. The cops have it. We have tremendous success stories that way. We're not a boots on the ground type organization, but we try to facilitate. We talk about the networking. If you're a CargoNet member and you need something, if you're in Arizona and you need something in Missouri, we'll connect you with the people we have there. It's about that, the network that we have, and getting you the best possible way to do it on your own. We want to enable you to be, I don't want this to sound bad, but a good victim. God forbid something does happen, that you're going to be in the best shape that you can be when it comes to reporting this and having a successful outcome.
Yeah. CargoNet. Now, I'm a client of CargoNet, and I remain that in my new position because my team has worked with CargoNet and had recoveries because of working with CargoNet. But they're not primarily for that. They're exactly what Gary talks about. You need to have other resources for recovering the freight. Like, does your insurance company have investigators like we do? Do you have private investigators? There's probably about 5 private investigators in the country that know how to do cargo theft. If I was anybody who was worried about cargo theft, I'd have all 5 phone numbers and names on my short list. And the other part of your question is prosecution. It depends on where you are, but what are you worried about? Do you want your load back or do you want prosecution? Right. I mean, the CTIPS task force in California has largely become a recovery group.
Correct.
Not a lot of great prosecutions going on in California, but CTIPS is recovering a ton of stuff. I mean, they are knocking the cover off the ball, right? So I would love to have the prosecution, but if you get me my stuff back, I'm 2/3 happy. I'll take 2/3 happy over no happy, right?
And then probably the reason why I mentioned prosecution, because at the end of the day, throughout the investigation and the network, and you get to see the recurrency in the same group.
Oh yeah.
Okay. It's always, well, not always, but most of the time it's the same group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, when you get, I'll put on my law enforcement hat and having some successful prosecutions, it takes the buy-in. You have to educate the prosecutor on what you're doing, and then you have to educate the victim on how to work with the prosecutor. Our friend John Cannon always says this: everybody wants to put out the fire, but nobody wants to roll up the hose. So a lot of cases, somebody, if your intention is just to get your stuff back, great, make that known in the beginning. But if you get the law enforcement involved, they get an arrest, they're going to need things 6, 18 months, 2 years down the road to see that through. I was part of a federal investigation, over $20 million in cargo theft. It took us 4 years to see all the convictions come down. And so you do not want to anger an assistant U.S. attorney by not returning an email or not following up on a phone call, because the chances that they help you again will be slim to none.
Yep.
And I want to flag there, Scrap Theft Alert is a service provided by ReMA for recyclers, law enforcement, to enter in thefts of materials. It goes right to CargoNet. Todd has done a fantastic job in building out that relationship for you all. Please utilize it for your cargo thefts. I think we're seeing that use increase over the last year, but it's definitely not as subscribed as it can be. We're working through new toolkits right now. There are new videos breaking that down. There is an update to our cargo theft toolkit coming out. So if you're not utilizing Scrap Theft Alert, please do. Find Justin, myself, or Todd at any point. He is currently at our law enforcement advisory council meetings, building out those relationships to help all of you, but don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to educate more on that. And I want to go into something that you mentioned where prosecution can take a long amount of time. We're often dealing with materials moving across state lines and often into international waters. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go into policy for a second, because you wouldn't have me as a moderator if I didn't go into policy for a minute. So I want to talk about CORCA, or the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, that's moving through Congress. It was a top priority for us at our 2026 fly-in, and Gary, the data that y'all provided was amazing to be able to bring to the Hill and show just the increase in not only cargo theft, but the value of thefts that are being stolen and diverted away from the supply chain. If CORCA passes, and Scott, you've worked a lot on this, how helpful will it be to actually alleviating cargo theft or helping law enforcement make these arrests?
I think I'll start with the pump the brakes comment first, which is a lot of people think that if CORCA passes, cargo theft is going to we solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And it's just not anywhere near accurate, right? We've created a tool, a useful tool, probably a better tool than we've had in the past to combat cargo theft, right? So the bill, the way we put in the language, requires the federal government to start tracking cargo theft, so we bring bigger visibility to the problem. I think bigger visibility is always step number one, because the bigger the problem, hopefully the more resources you're going to get. The second thing it does is it requires HSI to create a task force. That task force would be comprised of HSI, FBI, I think ATF, mm-hmm. and DOT. And usually when there's a federal task force, there's federal money to stand up task forces in other states. So we'd see a lot of those task forces that have gone away that Gary talked about come back, because the federal government basically says, give us 2 officers for our federal task force on cargo theft. We'll pay their salary, but they're designated to us, right? So now you're going to see officers pop up all over the country for cargo theft. So now you'll know who to call, right? And then it also calls for, I think it was 3 or 2 federal prosecutors. And that to me there's the teeth, right? Because you're going to get, let's say it's 3 prosecutors who are going to get at-bats. And as they get at-bats, they're going to get really good at bringing the right charges against these groups. And they're going to pick the states that they think they can get the best prosecutions in. And when they start to get good at it, we always joke about this. Cargo theft is addictive. You get involved in cargo theft as a career, it becomes addictive. Everybody who gets involved in it. We have an FBI agent right now working out of Philadelphia, and he says this to me all the time. He says, this stuff is addictive. I said, yeah, I know, but you start getting some federal prosecutors who get really into it and get really good at it, and they know how to shop jurisdictions and everything like that. I think then we'll start to see some teeth, and that I think could have a real impact.
What do you think the likelihood of it is moving this Congress?
I don't get.
We're in Vegas. Give us mods.
I don't get. Yeah. 3-1. I am not getting, as you said, I've been very involved in this. I've gone to DC on this bill, helped write the language. I've been to DC on this bill at least a dozen times, and I don't get any negative. It is bipartisan. I don't have anybody saying they won't support it. I haven't talked to everybody, obviously, but I'm not getting any indication from either side that they don't think this is worthwhile and worth passing. So I'm hopeful that it will get passed. I don't think it's high on the priority list, but I'm hopeful it'll get passed because there's really no resistance.
I think it's an easy win for Congress with something that is, by and large, very bipartisan at a time where not many pieces of legislation are, at least not to this level. But we're in a really pivotal time for Corca right now. And so if you haven't already reached out to your member of Congress or your senators with your stories of how you're experiencing cargo thefts, how it's impacting your businesses, your ability to invest, how it's hurting your employees, your operations, manufacturing growth, please do so. Now is the time to do it. There's potential likelihood it gets up on suspension in the House, which would be good. We'd see the bill move, but we're still waiting for Senate action. So reach out, have those conversations. They do want to hear from you all who are experiencing this on the day-to-day. We can go up with a broad aggregate of what you've experienced, but having that person-to-person interaction is important. And then outside of Corca, right, because it's just one bill, just makes a few changes, hopefully helpful changes. If you had one other policy lever that you could pull tomorrow, so you had a magic wand and you can make anything happen to reduce that theft, what would it be?
The sale of an MC number has to pass through the FMCSA and be approved. I'm all for capitalism, so I'm not saying you can't sell your MC number, but I think there has to be a process that is controlled by the FMCSA where if I want to sell my MC number to Gary, I apply to the FMCSA, make them aware that I'm selling my MC number to Gary. Gary fills in his information. They put him through the same screening they put through for new MC number applications, and that would take care of the MC purchase issue that we have going on right now.
And the MC purchase info was interesting when we went back to the few slides of the listings, right? Do you find that those entities know that their MC numbers are being purchased by bad actors, or is that such a small percentage of those who are selling?
I think some of those, when you look at some of those ads, they clearly know that they're selling them to bad people, and they've created a little cottage industry around it. I think a lot of the people that sell their MC numbers have no idea. The average trucker who is approached,
They think they're selling their business.
Yeah, they think they're selling their business. They're approached in a way, they're not approached by some shady guy. They're approached by somebody who's putting themselves out as a businessman. Hey, I'm expanding my trucking fleet. I want to buy your MC number. I see yours is dormant. They send legitimate paperwork over. They're not doing it, in a dark alley with a bunch of cash. And so the average person has not bought or sold a business in their life. So this all looks legit, right? And so I think it's a mix, but I think it leans more towards people not knowing who they're selling it to.
It's good to know. All right. Final questions from anyone in this room. There are 2 mics. Scott is not able to stay around afterwards for questions. He has to run. So this
Gary has all my contact.
I will answer on Scott's behalf.
Yeah.
Gary will hang out here for y'all.
God told me to tell you this.
Yeah.
All right. So final question then. If every company in this room could do one thing differently starting tomorrow, what would it be?
That's tough.
Yeah. One thing. I don't know. I'll go really high level again and just say, never do business with anybody that you are not 110% sure you know who they are, that you've not double or triple checked their phone number, their website, their email. You know, if they say I'm with ABC Brokerage or ABC Trucking, Google it, as Gary always says, find the real website, find the phone number on the real website, call that phone number. Hey, is Gary an employee of yours? Does he have the ability to book freight or to, drive truck for you? Does he drive truck for you or whatever? Right? You slow down just a little bit and make sure that you're doing that thorough check and 100% who you're doing business with. And don't rely too much on technology. There's some great technology out there. I'm a big proponent of some of the vetting platforms that are out there. Verified Carrier, Highway, there's some others, right? But people buy those and think, well, I don't have to do anything else now. This is it. And that's not the case. You still have to have your own process and procedures in place. And those technologies are meant to enhance what you're doing internally, and kind of, put the icing on the cake, so to speak. So don't do business with anybody that you are not 100% sure, and confirm it at the point of pickup, like Gary said. Don't be shy. Go take pictures of everything, scan everything. It's your business. It's your livelihood. It's your money. It's your metal. You get the information you need.
I would say invest and really strengthen whatever technology you employ right now. Check your vulnerabilities. Check, your firewalls, your protocols, your internet provider. Make sure and this goes beyond cargo theft. If you get a business email compromise, it shuts down hospitals, schools. You don't want your company to be shut down for 2 or 3 days. I spoke at an event with a legit cyber expert, and she told the crowd, 99% of those who have been affected will have to pay the ransom. There's no way out of it. They're that good. So strengthen that, check everything you've got, use your phishing. If your Outlook program or whatever email provider that you have doesn't have some way of testing, look into getting that tested. Strengthen your training policy. Don't click on these weird links. No, the CEO's not trying to give you Taylor Swift tickets. No, we're not sending you on a vacation to Italy. Things of that nature.
The prince does not need you to bail him out of prison.
Yeah. It's not even that. We talk about the social engineering. They're really good at knowing their target. They're really good at knowing who you are, what you do. So you just have to be real careful.
All right. Well, thank you to Gary and Scott for joining us today. And thanks all of you in the room for taking the time. Let's give a round of applause.